All right, guys, it's a little bittersweet because it's always awesome to get to an end of a book. Um, However, this book's so good, it kind of stinks actually getting to the end. The last chapter is called The End, so we'll read that, and then there's a quick little epilogue we'll read as well. All right, The End. An ear infection. Jeffrey had an ear infection. I missed the highlight of my year because Jeffrey had an ear infection. Thank God. It could have been so much worse. We spent pretty much the whole night at the local emergency room until Jeffrey's blood work came back at around 2 a.m. His white blood counts were low, but the doctor said that was probably just a response to the infection. His liver function test results actually looked better than they had in weeks. So this is going to be just the usual routine week of IV antibiotics in Philly's sickness. Jeffrey would be transported down there around 2 in the afternoon the next day. He had asked that I be allowed to ride down the ambulance with him, and I was willing. They hadn't exactly said yes yet, but I had a feeling it was going to happen. My dad and I went home to sleep for a few hours and packed my stuff. I collapsed into bed with my clothes on and didn't wake up until after 11 a.m. As soon as I went downstairs in the morning, I noticed that the answering machine was blinking. We had slept through a lot of phone calls. There were about 1,000,000 messages from people who had been at the concert, wishing us well and checking on Jeffrey's health status. Here are a few that jumped out at me. This is Judy Galley, Stephen's counselor from the middle school, calling. I hope Jeffrey's feeling better. Stephen, I was very proud of you tonight. When I first started working with you this year, you were so angry that I worried about you a lot, and you felt that you couldn't control your own life. Now, you have accepted control of your own path and are doing a wonderful job of helping those around you too. Just remember, instead of agonizing about the things you can't change, there's our again and again. I hit fast forward. I absolutely knew the rest by heart. Mr. Stoll here. I hope the little guy's okay. Stephen, don't worry about leaving the concert. Max asked me to sit in and cover your parts, and I did. The band sounded great. It wasn't what it would have been if you were here. If you were there. We all got by. Okay. Good night, dude. Will I see you at your lesson tomorrow? Max? Oh, yeah. Mr. Watrous. So that was his private band, or his private drum instructor, actually played in his spot at the concert. So pretty cool he took his spot. This is Renee Albert. Hi, Stephen. I hope your brother's okay. Hi, Mr. Alper. Hi, Mrs. Alper. Good news. We just finished totaling up the proceeds from the concert. $23,489.17. Stephen, Mr. Watrous is going to bring the check over later this week. I hope you let him in. Just kidding. This is Annette. I hope everything's all right there. Stephen, call me when you can about what happened, okay? You know, when you were leaving. I really meant it. I just wanted you to know. So if you guys remember what happened when he was leaving, she gave him a little smoochy smooch. It was interesting hearing Renee and Annette write in a row like that. Somehow, overnight, I had figured something out. Renee was beautiful, but she was my friend now. On the other hand, Annette was my friend, but now she was beautiful. It makes about as much sense as anything ever does when you're talking about girls, right? The day started. I ate and showered. My father drove me to the hospital. I got to have my first ambulance ride. Jeffrey squeezed my hand with all his might for about 40 miles. Good thing my drum lesson was canceled, because I wasn't sure I'd regain the feeling in my hand for a few days. Still, that was okay. I knew if I hadn't been there, he'd had nothing to squeeze. We got to Philly. My mom met us. Jeffrey got installed in a room. His IV bags got hung. I stayed with him until he fell asleep for a nap. Then I tiptoed out and went down the hall to say hi to Samantha and tell her how I had followed through on my promise to her. But when I got to her room, it was empty, and the bed was stripped. The next few minutes are a blur. I grabbed the little cord that calls the nurse and buzzed nonstop until a lady came charging in. She said in that semi-scary nurse voice, "What's wrong?" My voice came out all quiet and wobbly. There was a patient here. Her name is Samantha. She's my friend. Now she's not here, but she said she's always in this room. Did she get sent home? The nurse looked uncomfortable. Well, and then I knew. She's dead? She died? Answer me. Yes, she passed away early yesterday morning. She wasn't alone, was she? Was her mother with her? Yes, as far as I know, her mother was with her at the end. Was her sister with her? The nurse looked puzzled. Sister? That's when I lost it. I sat down and started crying and shouting and pounding on the floor and refused to get up. Somewhere in there, the nurse called for a social worker. Somewhere in there, my mom came running. Somewhere in there, another nurse came in with a wrapped package about 1.5 feet long, addressed from Samantha to me. My mom opened it in front of me. Samantha had returned my Pro Mark 5As with a note. Thank you for the company and for the loan. Please think of me when you use these, okay? Love, Sam. Oh, God. Now I would always have 2 pairs of special sticks. Whew. Yeah, not easy to get through, so super sad, obviously. And it impacts me more because the nurse, obviously, her sister wasn't there and hadn't been there for a long time because the nurse that he talked to didn't even know about his sister. So obviously that impacted him very much because the whole conversation that she had about making sure Stephen was there for Jeffrey. So here's an epilogue. The epilogue is when we kind of learn things that happened after the main action of the story. So, and the cool thing about this, it kind of goes like full circle. So if you remember the first page of the story, which if we were in class, I'd have you guys flip back to it, but it'd be a pain to go all the way back to the front, the top of this PDF. But the start of the story talks about he's sitting there and he says something like, I have a beautiful girl on my left, beautiful girl on my right. And we talked, when I was reading it, that sounds like it's a graduation. Okay, so now we're back to this. So you'll see how it kind of comes, like story like goes full circle back to the spot. Annette is sitting to the left of me. Renee is on my right. It's 2 months later, and I'm on the outdoor stage in my 8th grade graduation ceremony. We're in those special seats for kids who win the big awards. It's about 900 degrees out, obviously hyperbole, and my giant poofy brown gown is sticking to my arms like plastic wrap. But even though the baking sun is slowly laminating me, I'm happy. I've been thinking over this whole year in one gigantic rush. So I'm sure I've missed some key moments in the principal's speech. Suddenly there's an awfully sharp elbow slamming into my ribs. Clap, Stephen. Annette has that my boyfriend is from space look that I've been coming to know pretty well lately. So now we know that they're boyfriend-girlfriend. I snap back to reality and realize that Renee is standing to get her certificate. This year's Outstanding Achievement in Mathematics Award goes to Renee Albert. As Renee swishes back into her seat, and I must admit she can still swish in a world champion kind of way, Annette jabs me again right in the same spot. I'm up. The Outstanding Musical Achievement Award goes to Stephen Alper. I walk toward the podium for my big handshake moment as Annette and Renee applaud wildly. I don't swish like Renee, but at least I don't trip over my gown and go tumbling off the stage in the front row. As I sit back down, I have to laugh a little. I may be the only kid in America who ever clinched the Musical Achievement Award by skipping out on his big concert. I guess maybe my biggest achievement was learning that there's more to life than taking the big drum solo. Really important line in the book. Super important. Kind of shows Stephen's change from in the beginning of the story when he only cared about his drum solo and himself, and now he's showing how much he cares about other people. He went from being selfish to selfless. One more elbow jab and I'm clapping again. I'm especially honored to bestow our first ever Human Service Award to Annette Watson. Renee stands up. She's still clapping at top speed. Annette stops after her handshake and looks around. Just as Renee bends down to elbow me on the other side of my ribcage, I realize that I'm virtually the only person on the entire football field whose butt is still touching a chair. Annette has gotten a standing ovation. I jump up too, and the standing O is unanimous. Annette starts walking back toward us and called me crazy, but I think I'm detecting some swishing going on. When she gets back to her seat, she reaches out to hold my hand. We're both totally sweaty, but I kind of like it. Before I know it, I'm getting a tremendous double-sided elbow attack. I jump up as I realize it's time for that hat-throwing thing you always see in the movies. For some reason, I look out into the audience to where my family's sitting. About 33 rows back, Jeffrey is jumping up too and is holding the brim of his baseball cap. At the instant I throw my cap up, he tosses his. There's this amazing moment when both are hovering maybe 20 feet in the air. I look at Jeffrey, and even though he's so far away, I know he's looking at me too. From there, I can barely make out the inch or two of new blonde hair on his head, but I know it's there. So think about what that tells us. We can infer that his hair is growing back, so he must not be going through the chemotherapy he was going through. So things must be going pretty well. Just as our caps start to tumble back down, a huge cloud of balloon goes up. We're all cheering. Annette is hugging me. Renee's pounding on my back. My rents are on their feet too. The recessional music begins, and we all start shuffling out up the aisle. Do the shuffling out up the aisle thing. When I finally reach row 33, I want to stop and bask in the view of my mom and dad, Jeffrey, and my grandparents all standing together for me. But I also know that if I stopped, I'd get trampled by the 200 pairs of feet that are trudging along behind me. So I only pause for a moment. Jeffrey runs over to the aisle to slap me 5, and our eyes lock. He starts to speak. I can't hear the words or the shouts, the clapping, and the roar of the band, but I'm a good lip reader. I love you, Stephen. Suddenly, I'm blinking furiously, like there's something caught my eye, so you know what he's trying not to do, which I guess I kind of am too. It's a great part of the book. Before I have this mysterious vision issue under control, I'm about 20 rows past Jeffrey, so I've missed the moment for a quick reply. That's okay. I know Jeffrey knows how I feel. I know that in the middle of everything else that's gone swirling around us this year, I've been his play buddy, dropped everything for him, held his hand whenever he's asked. As I walked out the stadium to the grass where my classmates are milling about, wondering which way to start the next big walk into our futures, I think about Samantha. She died without a sister by her side, but she also made sure that Jeffrey would live with a brother by his. And of course, she showed me a thing or two. It's funny. I used to think that having a brother was the worst thing in the world. But now, I know that not having him would be worse. He comes running out of the stadium behind me, ahead of my parents, and slams into my legs like a 3-foot-tall express train. I turn to him and start to tell him the words I will now thankfully have time to say. Jeffrey, and that's how it ends. So we have to kind of think in our minds what he is going to say to him. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this book. It really is one of my all-time favorites for a bunch of reasons. I love, and I liked it before, but then after I had my own kids, I started to like it even more and more. I love the kind of sibling relationship thing. I was fortunate enough to have brothers who I didn't always appreciate, I guess, growing up, but now I really appreciate, and I'm guessing a lot of you guys are the same way. But it's also kind of a timely thing. Like in this story, it makes you realize like what's super important. So it took Stephen and his family going through this horrible thing for him to realize how important his brother was to him. Okay, now slightly sort of similar, like we've gone through this crazy time in our lives. You know, for some it's not as horrible, but still this challenging time in our lives. So hopefully a lot of you guys, and I know I have, started to realize what's super important in our lives. So family and all that stuff, really, really important. All right. So this week, you obviously only have this chapter or kind of 2 to read, and then you will take, we'll call it, I don't know what I called it in Schoology. I think just questions about the book. So you'll get a couple attempts, put a lot of effort in. I'm guessing you guys will do really well on it. It's not too difficult. I'm not calling it a test because it's really not a test. It's just questions on the book, and then a quick theme task. And then for later in the week, I'm going to have you watch this really cool video that I love called The Kindness Boomerang, and then do a quick task with that. And you'll have into next week to finish these things too. So you guys really have until like really the end of next week. So you kind of get 2 weeks to do this, but don't procrastinate like I used to do as a student. Not a good thing to do. So I hope you guys are doing great. I miss you. See you guys.